Parshas Mishpatim, Shabbos, Parshas Shekalim. We're beginning, believe it or not, we're beginning the Arba Parshiyos for Tov Shin Pei Vav. And you know what happens once the Dalet Parshiyos start? I mean, forget it, right? For Chodesh Adar, Purim's in the air, and from Purim we go to Pesach. It's a very quick ride now to Pesach. And the Nesivos Shalom tells us that there are very, very high inyonim and madregos in these weeks of the Dalet Parshiyos. Of course, every time of the year, every Yom Tov, every special occasion has something unique, something special, something that we could take out of. However, the Nesivos Shalom says about the Dalet Parshiyos that he brings from Reb Pinchas Mikoretz. I try to get a little history. I don't know who the Talmud of Zechusi Yogan Aleinu. Reb Pinchas said that the grandfather of Rameir Shapiro. Wow. Mamish, so now it means even more. But you listen to what he says. He says, in these weeks of the Dalet Parshiyos, he had the clearest Ruach HaKodesh that he had a whole year. So, of course, Avada, it's just difficult for us to even fathom what that means to Reb Pinchas, but nevertheless, the message is there. The message is there for every one of us that these are very, very special Shabbosos, very special weeks that we're going to be reading the Dalet Parshiyos, and we begin this week with Shabbos, Parshas Shekalim. But we try to think, what could we take out of this? Let's begin with this Shabbos. What could every one of us take out of this Shabbos? So most people that I know, they're probably not holding yet at that Madrega where they're going to be feeling a special Ruach HaKodesh this Shabbos. And if you do, then more power to you. And I want to hang around with you a little more. You have to let me know after Shabbos. But what is it that each person and every person on their own level needs to feel? Everybody should feel what these Shabbosos can do for us. So how do we go about that? We really need to try to understand what the basis is for the holiness of these weeks. And the reading, if you think about it, the reading of the Parshiyos themselves are really just a zikaron. They're just a commemoration. We read these Parshiyos to remind us of something. So we're not even doing those things really. Notice we're going to read Parshas Shekalim this week. So Parshas Shekalim reminds us of when they used to collect the Shekalim to go into the coffers of the Beis HaMikdash. And from that they would buy different things, karbonos, with that money. But unfortunately today we do not have a Beis HaMikdash. So what's happening here? We're telling you, we're understanding that these weeks are so holy and we're not really even doing anything. We're just commemorating something that was. So what does reading in the Torah actually accomplish? Obviously something very big, but what is just reading about it in the Torah, what is it accomplishing if it's something that is supposed to be done and we can't do it anymore? Especially by Parshas Zachar. Parshas Zachar we say, right, is Doiraisa. And in Parshas Zachar, Doiraisa, the reading becomes Doiraisa. Like where does the whole, how do we add up how chashuv and what a big thing these Dalet Parshiyos are if technically we can't be doing the things that it commemorates? And another interesting thing, says the Nesivos Shalom, is that we read these Parshiyos on Shabbos. Why do we have, anyone ever think about that? Why do we have Shabbos Parshas Shekalim? Why do we have Shabbos Parshas Zachar, Parshas Parah? Why? Why do we read about it on Shabbos? Why not read it on the day that it's Nagea. When should we read Parsha Shekalim? We should read it next week on Rosh Chodesh Adar. This Shabbos is going to be Shabbos Mevorchim Adar, believe it or not. So we should really read Parsha Shekalim on Rosh Chodesh Adar, because that's when it's Nagea. We should read Parsha Zachor on Purim, and we should read Parsha Zachodesh always on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Why do we read about it on Shabbos? So the Nesivos Shalom says that in order to understand all of this, we need to have a basic understanding of what the point of doing a mitzvah is. Right? We asked the question that we're not able to do these mitzvahs today. We're just reading about them. So what makes it so great that the Pinchas Mikoretz felt the highest level of Ruach HaKodesh on these Shabbosos, and every one of us is going to have such an inspiration? How do we understand what is the point of doing the actual mitzvah during the time that they were able to do the mitzvah? Zok the Nesivos Shalom, that the tachlis of every mitzvah is to give us the opportunity to be mekayem the mitzvah of dveikus Hashem. Every mitzvah that is done, every mitzvah that a person does has two parts of it. Number one, there's the actual mitzvah that you're doing, and number two, there is the fact that a mitzvah brings you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every mitzvah that a person does brings them closer to Hashem, and that's a separate thing besides from the actual mitzvah. So the Nesivos Shalom tells us that even though we can't do many of the mitzvahs of the Dalet Parshiyos, we can't do them, but that part of the mitzvah, the part of the mitzvah that would bring a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that does not go away, even though we can't do the actual mitzvah today. So what is Parsha Shekalim? Parsha Shekalim and the Machzis HaShekel, they have a very, very powerful side in that regard, in the regard of coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How does that work? The mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel, as we just mentioned a little bit before, the mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel ties a yid to the Beis HaMikdash. Right now, unfortunately, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. How do we get close? How do we become close to the Beis HaMikdash, the place of Hashras HaShechina, the ultimate connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and a Yid? V'asu li mikdash v'shalchanti b'soicham. How do we come close to that? How do we do that? Through the Beis HaMikdash and the Avodas HaKorbanos of the Beis HaMikdash. That's how a Yid connected to Hashem. So what do we do today? Today, we're missing that. We don't have that. So through the Machzis HaShekel, which was the vehicle that's financed the Karbonos, that's how the Machzis HaShekel is what brought a Yid the closeness in the Beis HaMikdash. How did the carbon come about? You have to buy the carbon. Where did the money from buying the carbonos come from? The Machzis HaShekel. So Machzis HaShekel is what brought a Yid to the ultimate closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Machzis HaShekel was the beginning of that, the way to purchase your way into bringing carbonos in the Beis HaMikdash. Says in the Nesivos Shalom, that part of the mitzvah, this is something that a neshama cannot do without. That part of the mitzvah is never lost. That part of the mitzvah of bringing a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't bring the carbon. You can't buy the carbon. But the Machzis HaShekel, that part of it bringing a person closer, very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that still stays with us. The Rambam, at the beginning of Hilchos Shekalim, says something very interesting. The Rambam tells us that even an ani, even someone who's poor. I'm not sure why I'm losing my voice here. Maybe just the holiness of the weekend is coming here. We're starting to feel the power of the, but somehow my voice is on the way out. I'm not sure why. But an ani, Dr. Rambam, even an ani who is misparnes from tzedakah, an ani who supports himself from tzedakah is mechuyav in machzis hashekel. A poor person has to borrow money to do the mitzvah of machzis hashekel. Why? So the Rambam is telling us that every yid needs this chelek of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Dafka machzis hashekel is one of the few mitzvahs we know by Dalet Koisis, and each one, right, has their own reason. But there must be a reason why the Rambam says that even an ani has to borrow money for machzis hashekel, because a yid cannot do without that connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And every year, the machzis hashekel renews our connection with Hashem, and that we cannot be mevatel even b'shas golus, even in a time where there is no Beis Hamikdash. The Churban Beis Hamikdash, says in Nesivos Shalom, was on the outside. He brings from the Koshetz Magid. The Koshetz Magid, Chusi Yogan Aleinu, tells us, and he mentions it, Nesivos Shalom mentions it many times, that Churban Beis Hamikdash was on the outside. The pnimius of the Beis Hamikdash, the closeness that we can and we want to feel with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that still, the pnimius still exists in the world right now, in the neshama of the Beis Hamikdash. That connection never goes away. So Zok the Nesivos Shalom, that we read these parshias Davka on Shabbos. We want to know why we're reading Parsha Shekalim Shabbos. Read about it on Rosh Chodesh Adar, because now that we know what the purpose of the mitzvah that we do is now, we know the purpose of the mitzvah is to be masakin our neshama, to bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the ultimate closeness that a person wants to and needs to feel with HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot come during the week. It can't come during the week. Shabbos is Yoima de Nishmasa. Shabbos is a day that's mesugal every single week to bring a yid closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Today we don't have the actual mitzvahs of the Dalet Parshias. We don't have them. But as we just mentioned throughout the Shir, the part of the mitzvah of Dveikus B'Hashem, the part of the mitzvah of using those shkolim to purchase kabbanas, to be in the Beis Hamikdash, to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is still there. So it turns out that the whole mitzvah is now, today, about coming closer to Hashem, and that's probably why Reb Pinchas felt the Ruach HaKodesh. He felt that tremendously high level of Dveikus B'Hashem. So if it's all about Dveikus B'Hashem, the ultimate day for that, as we've said so many times here in our shir, the ultimate time and the ultimate day for that is, of course, on the Shabbos Kodesh. That can only happen on Shabbos. So the reading of these parshias is the connection through which the neshama of these mitzvahs and the Shabbos, which is Yom Nishmasa, so we read it on Shabbos, because Shabbos is the biggest possibility for us to actually accomplish that type of Dveikus B'Hashem. So it goes without saying, now we're coming to the Dalet Parshias, so we're going to go into this Shabbos, and all the four Parshias with a different perspective. Not just that, it's a wonderful thing. We take out a second Sefer Torah, we have more Divrei Torah to say, we have an extra Parsha, Shabbos Mevarchim, Rosh Chodesh, everything coming up. But let's remember on this Yom HaNishmasa, on this Shabbos, how much we can accomplish. We could accomplish a super high level in Dveikus B'Hashem.